Good morning, Trondheim friends, and it's Pastor Sue here coming to you with my weekly episode of Patio Ponderings. The patio that I'm on today is the lovely gardens in the front of the church, and I am so grateful for those people who work so hard to keep them looking so lovely. And I'm particularly grateful that you actually tuned in today to this episode, given the subject matter. Today we are talking just a little bit about death and grief, and that is such a hard subject for us, particularly in our culture. But it was the subject of our story on Sunday. The woman named Rizpah, she's a mother who lost 2 of her sons along with 5 others in a brutal execution that came about as political negotiations by King David. And as part of that, Rizpah and the other families were denied the opportunities to carry out the customary rites and rituals that they normally did when someone died. Which is interesting because then Rizpah goes on to be the foremother of a Jewish ritual known as Shmurna, which is the guarding of the deceased between death and burial. Now, the Jewish tradition has a lovely menu of rites and rituals that they do to grieve the loss of a loved one. They lovingly wash the body after death. They do Shmurna to guard the body. They sit Shiva with each other. They're present with each other in comfort. And they do this for days. But in our secular society, our North American secular society, we have done everything we can to pare down our rites and rituals, to eliminate discussion of death and grief. If we even think about the benefits we might get at a workplace, when immediate family dies, the customary leave time is 3 days. And 3 days is barely enough time to do those initial things that we need to do when someone dies. And we do everything that we can to avoid the subject of death and to avoid death itself. And we live in kind of a state of denial that death is even going to affect us in our lives. We like to pretend it's never going to come. And so when someone does die, we really struggle. In the pandemic, we lost the ability to do a lot of the rites and rituals that we have preserved in our culture, and I think we saw that it didn't diminish our grief, it didn't make things easier. In fact, it only magnified our sorrow and left us feeling without closure in many instances. And so I just want to touch very, very briefly today on grief. And what I want to let you know primarily is that the feelings that you feel, the things you want to say, the things that you need to do during grief are normal. We do so much to kind of want to make people feel better right away that we've lost the ability to create space for each other in death and when we lose somebody. And I think that is to our detriment, and it's left us ill-equipped to deal with grief. And so I'd like to encourage you and to encourage each other to move back into creating space for each other. We aren't going to feel better right away. There are no magic words to say that are going to help us along the way. We simply need to take the journey that we need to take when we lose somebody. And it doesn't mean if our journey is longer or shorter, or if we're feeling something this way or something that way, that there's something broken in us, that there's something needs to be fixed. It is a very individual thing. And so my message for all of us today is to simply create the space for each other that we need to grieve, to mourn the loss of loved ones, to be safe for others, to share what they need to share, to talk about what they need to talk about, to feel what they need to feel, to do so without judgment. And I'd like to ask us to simply be present with each other in grief and to simply listen. I think those are the very first steps that any and all of us can take to be with each other in times of loss. And know this, that none of us are alone in our grief, that we always have Jesus Christ with us, that He is there for all of us, feeling the things that we feel. Jesus expressed grief in Scripture when He lost His friend Lazarus, when he died. Jesus wept. And so Jesus knows what we are feeling. And we can always count on Jesus' life and Jesus' own death and resurrection to give us hope as we go through the process. Well, thank you for joining me today for this very brief conversation on a very big topic. And I hope to see you next week on Patio Ponderings. Thanks. Have a wonderful day.